There are some journeys you choose, and there are some journeys that choose you. Elena Marek had spent 15 years learning to tell the difference. Tonight, standing on a platform in Prague at 11:47 in the evening, with the temperature at -14 and a blizzard the forecasters had named but no one had predicted this early, she was no longer certain which kind of journey this was. She had been many things in her career: an analyst, a field operative, a courier of secrets so fragile they existed only in the space between two people who would each deny the conversation happened. She had retired from intelligence work, officially, but people like Elena Marek do not retire the way other people retire. They simply change the nature of their attention. The ghost line. She had almost smiled at the name when she booked it. A heritage sleeper, the brochure promised, mahogany paneling, white-gloved service, a dining car with crystal glasses that rang when you tapped them. Prague to Vienna, overnight, through the Austrian Alps, a relic of a different age. Marketed to tourists who wanted to feel history beneath their feet without any of the inconvenience of actually living through it. What the brochure did not mention was the blizzard, or the other passengers. She catalogued them the way she had always catalogued rooms. The young man first, mid-20s, an encrypted laptop, 2 stickers that told her nothing, and software running that told her everything. His hands were still, but his eyes were not. He was watching the door. He had been watching the door before she arrived, which meant he was not watching for her specifically. He was watching for something he expected and dreaded in equal measure. The professor she filed as secondary. Elderly, absorbed, annotating in 3 languages, Czech, German, and something older she did not immediately recognize. His maps were real. She could tell from the way he handled them, the reverence of a man who understood that old paper does not forgive rough fingers. First time on the ghost line, yes? I can always tell. You look at the train like it might disappear. Does it? Ha! Only in stories. I am Vasik. Whatever you need tonight, I am here. Vasik. He offered the name the way a card is placed on a table, visible, deliberate, face up. She noted the accent, Eastern European, composite, a man who had lived in many countries without belonging to any of them. She knew the type. She had been the type. The train departed at midnight precisely. Prague dissolved behind them into the blizzard, the platform lights becoming smears, then suggestions, then nothing. Elena sat in the observation car with a glass of wine she did not drink and watched the snow erase the world outside. And she told herself she was simply tired, simply reading the room out of habit, simply being the person she no longer needed to be. Some tracks were never meant to be followed. In intelligence work, there is a concept called negative space. It is the art of reading what is not there, the chair pulled back from a desk but not replaced, the name not mentioned where it should have been central. Elena Marek had spent 15 years becoming fluent in negative space, and the young man with the encrypted laptop was screaming it. He had not introduced himself. In a heritage sleeper with fewer than a dozen passengers on an overnight mountain crossing, that was unusual. People introduced themselves. It was the social grammar of enforced proximity. He offered none. He sat with his hands on the keyboard and his eyes on something she couldn't read, and he radiated the specific energy of a person who knows something terrible and hasn't yet decided what to do about it. The brake jolt lasted 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, she gripped the armrest and watched the room tilt and resettle. And when it was over, she was already counting the professor reaching for his maps, Vasik catching 2 glasses simultaneously with the reflexes of someone who had practiced that exact motion, the windows showing nothing but dark and snow, and the coder's table dry. No water glass, only the ring on the surface where a glass had sat. The man, the laptop, the bag, gone, as though they had been simultaneously lifted from the room and placed somewhere else. The young man who was sitting there, did you see where he went? Which young man? Which young man? She looked at him carefully. His expression was exactly right. Mild puzzlement. The face of a man searching his memory politely for something he hadn't noticed. Too right. Practiced right. Vasek had been tending bar all evening. He had seen every passenger. The question was not which young man. The question was why that answer. Professor, the young man with the laptop, you spoke to him earlier, you remember? I am sorry, my dear. I don't believe I spoke to anyone with a laptop. Are you certain he boarded at Prague? Are you certain he boarded at Prague? She replayed the platform in the complete fidelity of trained recall. She was certain. She had been trained to be certain about exactly this kind of thing. And then she went back to her berth and found the note on her pillow, written in a hand she didn't recognize, on paper slightly too thick, slightly too old, smelling faintly of something mineral, like the inside of a place that had never seen sunlight. Some tracks were never meant to be followed. She read it twice, turned it over, held it to the light, and did what 15 years of training had taught her to do when the evidence exceeded the explanation. She went back to the beginning and started counting everything she knew for certain, which was, she realized, considerably less than she had assumed when she boarded. Blood is a particular kind of evidence, not because it is dramatic. Elena had long since stopped associating blood with drama, but because it is committed. Blood does not appear by accident. It is a record of something that happened in this precise location with sufficient force to breach the boundary between inside and outside a human body. It is a statement. Tonight, it was a sentence, written in a thin red line along the corridor floor, leading toward a locked service door at the far end of car 3. She crouched over it. The trail was not a smear, not the mark of something dragged. It was a series of drops, evenly spaced, the forensic signature of a wound that was bleeding consistently as the person bearing it walked. The drops were fresh. She could tell from the color, the way they had not yet fully darkened at the edges. 20 minutes old, perhaps 30. Whatever had happened here had happened within the window of the brake jolt. The professor appeared at her shoulder before she heard him coming, which told her two things simultaneously: that he moved with the deliberate quiet of a man accustomed to not being noticed, and that he had been following her, or at least had known which direction she would go. You've seen this before, haven't you? Not this trail specifically, but the pattern, yes. The ghost line has a particular history that its operators prefer not to include in the brochure. His name was Professor Antonin Sedlak, not simply a retired academic annotating old maps. He had been on the ghost line 4 times, the first in 1987 as a young researcher. He had lost a colleague on that journey, a woman named Hanna, who had gone to the observation car after dinner and had not returned. The train had arrived in Vienna on time. Hanna had not been on it. There had been an official explanation that explained nothing. He had spent the intervening decades mapping the route, not the railway route, the other one, the older one, the path the ghost line followed through passes that older maps marked with symbols, recurring across Central European cartography for 600 years, always associated with the same locations, mountain passes where travelers had gone in and not come out, where searchers found belongings but never bodies, where the local people had developed, independently and consistently, the same practice. They did not travel those passes after dark. The radio is out. It always goes out here. We are in the pass. We have been in the pass for the last 40 minutes. We should have been through in 20. The train was moving. She could feel it, the vibration in her feet, the motion through her bones. But it had been inside the same mountain pass for twice as long as the geography allowed, which meant either Sedlak's maps were wrong, and 4 decades of careful accumulation argued otherwise, or the pass was not something the train was moving through. it was something moving around the train. She filed the thought, the way she had always filed the things she was not yet ready to process, and she turned back to the blood trail and the locked door and the problem that was in front of her. Cycles that repeat every storm. Cold is a language, once you learn to read it. Not the cold of weather or winter, which has texture and logic and arrives from somewhere and will eventually leave, but the cold of something that has been without warmth for so long that it has forgotten warmth was ever possible. That was the cold that greeted them as they moved toward the engine. It did not arrive. It had always been there. They were simply walking deeper into it. The service passages were narrow and unlighted, and they moved through them by the faint blue glow of Elena's phone, which still had power but had lost all network connection. She was navigating by the simple principle of forward, which was the only direction available. Behind them, the passenger carriages receded. Ahead, the cold increased, and with it, a sound she had been hearing for minutes without consciously registering it. A low harmonic hum, too regular for mechanical resonance, too complex for a single source. Something that felt imprecisely like voices that had forgotten the shapes of words. She had been trained to encounter unexpected things without broadcasting her reaction, the ability to absorb the genuinely shocking and respond only with the portion of yourself that was useful. She used that training now. The panel was not a screen in any conventional sense. No frame, no manufacturer's mark, no visible power source. Simply light, structured, purposeful light that filled the forward window and projected into the space where the dark mountain track should have been, images, passengers, dozens of them, overlapping, rendered in the tonal quality of old photographic slides, the faces carrying the expressionlessness of people who did not know they were being recorded. The ones who did not arrive. Every storm, every cycle, they go somewhere on the track, but they do not come out the other side. These are photographs? Not photographs, residuals, what the past remembers, what it keeps. She moved closer. The images shifted as she approached, not randomly but responsively, the way a document reorganizes itself when you scroll. She had the cold, precise thought of a person who had spent years cataloging information. This was an archive, not a memorial, not a haunting in the lazy, cinematic sense of unresolved emotion replaying itself. An archive, organized, searchable, something that had been accumulating this data with the patient, systematic thoroughness of an institution that understood the value of records. She felt, for the first time since boarding, what she recognized as fear, not the productive fear of threat assessment, which sharpened the mind and sequenced B options, the other kind, the kind that arrived when you understood you were not in the type of problem that had known solutions. He's already in there. Clothes. The light behind him was summer light. He had been on this train before. He had been in this archive before. He was not a passenger who had disappeared for the first time tonight. He was a recurrence, a cycle, something that repeated, as Vasik had said, with every storm. The pass was not moving them through it, it was collecting them. In 15 years of intelligence work, Elena Marek had developed what she privately called the doctrine of last resort. Simple: when every conventional option has been assessed and found insufficient, return to first principles. What do you know for certain? What does the evidence actually say? Strip away interpretation, assumption, the accumulated weight of everything you expected to find, and look only at what is demonstrably, provably, undeniably in front of you. Then decide what to do about that. She applied the doctrine now. A train moving through an alpine pass for twice the time the geography allowed. A young man vanished during a brake jolt. the radio silent, the engine operating without a driver, and ahead of her a panel she could not explain displaying records of passengers who had disappeared on this route across what appeared to be decades, records maintained with the systematic care of something that did not forget and did not stop. The woman's name was Dr. Marta Kopf, a cardiologist from Salzburg, returning from a conference in Prague, warm and direct and prone to laughing at unexpected moments with the compact energy of someone who had chosen her profession because she genuinely liked being useful to people. That woman was not in the corridor. The body walking past had her face, her clothes, her posture, her gait. But Dr. Marta Kopf had a quality of aliveness, a specific, crackling presence Elena had registered across the dining car that was simply absent from what moved past them now. She went to the observation car 20 minutes ago. She must have been in the pass when the cycle turned. What does that mean? What cycle? The pass does not take people. I have spent 40 years understanding this. It borrows them. Something in the geology, in the fault lines, in the way the mountain channels certain kinds of electromagnetic resonance, creates a loop. The same storm, the same window, the same crossing, repeated. People inside experience one crossing. Outside, time continues. They return, but they return carrying the inside with them. The cold, the distance, the absence of everything that was sharpened by being alive in an uncertain world. She thought about Dr. Kopf laughing across the dining car. She thought about the coder's hands, restless on the keyboard, afraid of something he knew was coming. She thought about the particular quality of human attention, the way it reached and questioned and refused to accept, and she understood what the pass was taking. Not life, not memory, not identity. The part that was afraid, the part that cared what happened next. She turned back to the archive panel. The faces shifted and reorganized. She found the coder 3 separate images, 3 separate storms, 3 separate versions of the same frightened young man arriving at the same moment and passing through the same loop. He knew. He had come knowing. He had come with his encrypted laptop full of documentation, trying to reach someone on the other side of the storm, and the pass had taken his fear and returned his function. Again and again and again. If you touch it, you become part of the record. Someone has to. Elena. Someone has to be in the record who knows what the record is, who can read it from the inside. She had made decisions under pressure before, decisions with permanent consequences, made in the compressed time of operational necessity, when the cost of inaction exceeded the cost of committing to an uncertain action. She had made those decisions and lived with them, and occasionally, in the honesty of very late nights, had wondered which of them she would make differently if she could return to the moment. This did not feel like those decisions. This felt simpler, cleaner. Someone had to be in the archive who was still afraid, still reaching toward things, still constitutionally, professionally, inalterably unable to leave a room without understanding what had happened in it. That was not a qualification she had acquired, it was what she had always been. The Ghost Line had collected many passengers across many storms. Careful people, frightened people, people who had come with documentation and good intentions and had been smoothed into function and returned to the world lighter than they had left it. It had never, in all its recorded cycles, collected someone who arrived already knowing that fear was not a liability, that the reaching toward, the refusal to stop asking, was not a vulnerability to be harvested. It was the one thing in the archive that the past did not know how to file. Elena Marek stood in the light of the Ghost Line's deepest record, and she looked at all the faces it had kept. And she began with the systematic patience of someone who had spent 15 years learning to read what was not there to understand. Some tracks were never meant to be followed, but someone had to follow them. Someone who understood that the most dangerous thing you could carry into the dark was not a weapon, not a file, not an encrypted record of everything you had witnessed and survived. The most dangerous thing you could carry into the dark was the absolute refusal to come back empty-handed. Elena Marek had never come back empty-handed in her life. Then, silence. Then, the ghost line moves on.